All right. Now we're rolling. Now I've got almost everything rolling, except for my except for one more here, and we'll get that going too. Let me get up on the chat room on TalkShoe, and we'll start back. In 2004, I came out with the okay. Let's get this going. Get this going. Ah, no. Why isn't this working here? Come on, folks. Okay. All right. I think I've got it all working now. I think everything's working. And, all right. All right. We're on everywhere.
Live.
We're on everywhere now. We got everything working. Everything seems to be working. And I'll be in the chat room in Blog Talk. All right. The magazine here, Free American. I had the Free American, the building number 7 on the cover. It says, "Why did it fall? Why did it fall?" And I had Larry Silverstein's quote here. He said, "We've had such a terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it." And the New York Fire Department, made the decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse. I pointed out that in order for that to happen, they had to have explosives planted in it beforehand. And I remarked on the air that this could be an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning? Seems I wasn't too off the mark. And this is not a case of anti-Semitic slander, and merely an observation of the fact. And this is not to say that Larry Silverstein is the sole culprit here. I said in this issue, 2004. He did not force the U.S. Air Force to stand, and NORAD to stand down while the hijacked planes made their way to Washington. He did not recruit or train the pilots who hijacked the aircraft. He did not force the federal government to come in and remove the evidence of explosives that ultimately brought the buildings down. He did not fly the top 50 top executives whose offices were in the Twin Towers to a secure airbase in Nebraska, where, along with Warren Buffett, they watched the planes fly into their offices at an hour. Few of them were awake on that day. A few hours later, President Bush joined them as he flew in from his meeting with the school children in Louisiana. More likely, Larry Silverstein was approached by either or both of the two governments who had a plan for world domination in place. Project for the New American Century and the Patriot Act. These neocons were just waiting for the right catastrophe to force them own the people of the world. The conversation may have gone something like this: you know, these buildings will have to be demolished sooner or later. Buy them, insure them heavily, and let us rig them with explosives. At the proper time, you'll pull them, and we will get your money. The explosives had to be planted in the buildings, folks, before. Now here is another piece to the puzzle that only subscribers of the Free American got. Not the Truth Movement hasn't put this out. The so-called Truth Movement. It hadn't happened yet. This is from Tom Gordon. He is a systems engineer and an unwitting participant He says in 1988, I moved to New York City seeking architectural photography assignments from various key architects. Before moving there, I asked for help from my prior clients in Denver. One good friend and close ally, Herb Roth, suggested I contact my friends at Emery Roth Architect, no relation. After the usual portfolio review and pricing discussions, Barry Roth asked me to cover the World Trade Center. This assignment, I thought, would be one of the greatest opportunities of my life. It was widely known that Ezra Stoller and Associates and Norman McGrath had laboriously photographed the World Trade Center for a period of over 1 year. They created some of the finest known images of the towers, and the most memorable ones are at twilight with the Statue of Liberty in the foreground. They informed me that Ezra had actually photographed it routinely for something like 6 years. I was allowed to analyze the firm's existing photo files before I began my coverage. I asked a lot of questions, which is how I learned most of the background information I'm about to cover. The librarian at Emery's offices was actually the main corporate secretary, whose demeanor was more like someone you'd expect to work at the Metropolitan Museum, totally reserved and humorless. This was my first challenge and frankly a cause for alarm. Not long after the buildings were built, the World Trade Center owners retained the architect of record and their photographer and several principal engineers from the original consulting firm to establish the safety of the Twin Towers. Each of their staff members worked on this project on a full-time contract basis, most of them for a period of about 10 years. By 1989, it was very late in the process, but there were still about 15 current participants involved in it. I found all of the facts to be highly unusual and perhaps simply beyond my 10-year experience level. My assignment was to apply my Julius Schulman technique, or photograph both of the towers in their contextual situation, not the buildings, but especially how they fit with the neighborhood. After a month and a half, I'd exhausted my interest in the street vantage point, so I decided to go up in the towers early one morning to see which adjacent rooftops could offer the most suitable additional views. It was still too cold to shoot these views. This was between May 9th and May 13th, 1989. Carrying my lightweight 35mm gear, I was singled out from the regular building patrons by the lobby guards, which totally surprised me. I explained the nature of my business with a moderate degree of assurance, but was shocked when they reacted as though I had been expected. Very matter-of-factly, one of them phoned upstairs while another insisted he was sending a guard with me to ensure that I would arrive at the engineering offices in time for our meeting. The suite was labeled Skilling and Jackson, PC, whom I had no knowledge of. Who I had knowledge of, but no prior relations with. Had this been the leasing office, I would have understood the mix-up perfectly. Clearly, this was not a situation that could pertain to me in any way. I was not aware that Roth had an office in the building at all, but like a true rookie, I was feeling keen to discuss my ability with their big guns, since any contact with such people here could lead me to major future assignments. When we arrived at the door to the suite, I was very shocked to see the actual sign on their main office door. The door jamb itself was of completely service-grade materials, just like an ordinary back door to any other suite. The sign was brand new and simply said Skilling Associates, PC. This was a small engraved laminated sign from an ordinary office. I thought to myself, these people have been here for over 10 years. Everyone sit down and be quiet. Who's this? The orator said loudly, staring at me. I'm the official photographer from Roth. Like, who are you and what's it to you, buddy? Haven't you heard of me? Unflinchingly sober and businesslike, he said without a breath. Then you are to be included. Who sent you here? I said, Barry Roth. I just got a message from his secretary, which was almost completely true, but she hadn't called about this to my knowledge. He nodded and addressed the full group, then reading from a 4x5 file card, acknowledged some absentee members and confirmed their knowledge and prior agreement of compliance. He said to the few of us in the special group, listen carefully. Nobody gets out of this. Each of you were called to sign an affidavit of non-disclosure.